Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Wherever you are in the world, welcome. Today's presentation will be Mobile Content Management in the Age of Multiple Devices. I hope you'll enjoy our presentation today. I'm Tom Murphy, the General Manager and Editorial Director for Simpler Media Group and CMSwire. I hope you'll also enjoy our program. Our agenda today is about 5 minutes for introductions, about 35 minutes with Scott Infante and Fred Faulkner, and then 15 to 20 minutes with a live Q&A featuring your questions. First, we have a few housekeeping tasks to take care of. We are taking questions throughout this program via WebEx. You can use the chat or the QA modules over on the right side of your screen. Just ask a question, hit the send button, and our editors will make sure that we get that on the list for later in the show. So please do that throughout the show. You can also send questions in via Twitter at CMSwire. The WebEx Chat function is located in the center of the right column. If you look at the middle of that bar, you'll see the word chat, a little pull-down arrow that opens up the window that you'll use. WebEx Q&A panel is right below that. Make sure you address it to all panelists so that we all see the questions. We'll be having interactive polls during this program to get you more involved. We really want to see your answers to our question. And that will pop up at the bottom of the right column, and we do have a polling question logged in. Right now you won't see polling, but you will when we have one, and I'll alert you to that point. When you see one, please read the question, select your answer, and hit the submit button promptly so that we can total the results and get on with the program. Thank you. Now a little about CMSwire. We were founded about 11 years ago. We have more than 300 editorial contributors, including many folks just like you. We publish more than 200 articles a month. We have monthly editorial themes, monthly tweet jams, hangouts, webinars, and there you see our primary topic areas: customer experience, digital marketing, social business, enterprise collaboration, and enterprise information management. With us today are ICFI and FirstEnergy Corp. ICFI, formerly CityTech, as a full-service digital agency. I'm sure you're all familiar with that. They are a marketing technology enablement company. You can learn more about them at citytechinc.com or citytechinc.com, or write to them at info@citytechinc.com. FirstEnergy Corporation is a diversified energy company dedicated to safety, reliability, and operational excellence. They're out in Ohio. Glad to have them here today, and you can learn more about FirstEnergy Corp at their website. Our first speaker today is going to be Fred Faulkner. He's Director of Marketing and Digital Strategist at ICFI. He has 13 years experience in website development and management. He specializes in marketing technology solutions, including email marketing, platforms, web analytics, search engines, and social media marketing. Joining Fred later in the program will be Scott Infante, who has more than 10 years of experience working in the IT field for Fortune 200 companies. He has managed teams of web developers, architects since 2008, with the implementation of Adobe CQ happening in 2010. He developed and implemented FirstEnergy Corp's mobile strategy for both external, B2C, and his B2E internal audiences. Now we're going to start today's presentation with Fred Faulkner. And Fred, we're going to shift control to you, and you will show your first slide, please.
Thanks, Tom. Good morning, everyone, and good afternoon for some of you that are on the East Coast. Thank you for joining me and Scott today to talk to you about something I think every organization should be thinking about and why you're on, which is really mobile content management. There we go. So let's start by talking about what Forrester Research is calling mobile moments. I'm sure we've had all of them. You might be sitting on the couch watching a little TV, pull out your tablet, see something on the television that might render or trigger you to actually want to go to a website, and maybe inquire about what you see on that television commercial, maybe that program you saw, a product that you might want to investigate on, and you pull up your tablet and you want to go check it out online. Maybe you're like me, who actually just had to do a little bit of traveling like I was this morning, and I needed to check on my flight status to make sure that I was actually going to make it. My flight so I can make it to our webinar today. Or maybe you're one of the hundreds of thousands of people who commute every day on public transportation, and take that moment of that time, maybe looking out the window, or maybe you're staring down at your mobile device and actually catching up on social media, or maybe some email, or actually just maybe downloading and reading a book that you wanted to check out because that's what you do and it's downtime for yourself. These are mobile moments. And as a brand owner, a content creator, someone who manages a website, it's your responsibility to not only make sure that brand experience is good, that it makes sure that it fulfills what those visitors and content consumers, maybe customers are looking for, but it's also your responsibility to make sure that it works across all the different platforms and different engagement models that you're trying to accomplish. That could be from your mobile site to your desktop site, maybe even in social media, and really those are the things that we're going to talk about today. So you really have to start to ask yourself, are we ready for the 2.3 billion people who are going to be using smartphones by 2017? Are we ready for the fact that of the smartphone users today, 52% of them are expecting to have a mobile-friendly website? And of those same consumers, 42% of them are expecting you to have a mobile app. Are you really ready for the inevitability that this year, 2014, mobile internet usage is going to outgrow desktop usage? And how does that affect how you're engaging with your customer base and your consumers? And really, as I mentioned in the beginning part about that mobile moment, sitting on your couch, are we ready for this multi-screen world where 90% of all media interactions are actually based on a screen? And then of those, 38% of your day is actually spent interacting with a smartphone. Mobile is going to be there all the time, and it's going to be in your face and for your consumers. So really, are you ready for that? And finally, have you thought about planning out how you're going to actually manage those mobile experiences and how you're going to create that content and distribute it to all your different platforms? Having the right strategy, a platform and process in place is really going to be crucial to how you're managing those overall customer experiences and what those mobile moments are. So that's really what we're going to talk about today, is how do you manage that content across all your different platforms, all your different engagement models, all your different mobile experiences, and making sure that you not only can create those experiences, but how you can manage that effectively. So the $64,000 question really is going to start to become, do you go desktop first or mobile first? And really that is just a really hard question to ask and answer, because some of you have invested a lot of money and energy into your desktop site, and now you're being tossed with this idea of having to have a mobile experience. So how are you going to actually manage that, and how are you going to actually make it happen? Regardless if you already start with a desktop site or if you go to a mobile site, you really need to consider what your options are and make sure you're going to engage with them, engage with your consumers in the best way possible. So that's really where we're going to start today, because I have a question for you, and I'm curious. How are you guys addressing mobile today? So Tom, can we throw up that first poll question?
Yes, we can. We'll just have our producer put that up, and there it is. What method are you using to deliver mobile content today? And there are your choices there: responsive design, mobile website, native app hybrid, native app pure, or you're not sure, or it doesn't apply to you. Please pick an answer. We'd like everybody in our audience to vote today, and be sure to hit the submit button in the lower right portion of the screen so that we can count your vote. Well, Fred, we're off to a good start with the presentation, but I'm wondering, what do you think most people are going to pick in this answer?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Tom. And, you know, it's going to be a tough call because it depends on really if we have an opportunity or they've had an opportunity to start from something from scratch, or they're actually trying to retrofit into a mobile experience. So I think it's going to be really a cross between all of them, you know, from the sense of whether they're using a mobile app or they're going to a mobile site. I think responsive design, as we'll talk about, is going to be also an interesting point of where they want to go, but I'm not sure how many people are actually engaged in that so far.
Yeah, it's a good, I think that's probably right. It's going to be across the board. I'm going to guess, go out on a limb here and say that a lot of people are going to have some native apps hybrid. We'll see where these come in. We're tallying the results now. We should be closing the poll in a moment. There that is. And we should be seeing the results here in just another few seconds. And then I'll turn the program back over to Fred after that. I think everybody's going to be really interested to hear the rest of Fred's presentation and the case study that we have planned with Scott later on. You two are going to be talking about that. And here are our results. Well, I was dead wrong. The leading answer is responsive design. Good choice. And mobile sites is number 2, really, for those who answered. So interesting results, and now I'm going to turn the program back over to Fred.
Thanks, Tom. And those really are some interesting results. I'm actually pretty surprised that responsive design has such a high ranking at the moment. So as we jump into talking about your different strategies, let me just give you a quick background. So at ICF Interactive, also known as CityTech, which was part of a recent acquisition, we work with a number of content management systems and mobile development frameworks. But really for today's purpose and for our conversation today, we're going to focus on the Adobe technology stack, which includes a couple of different ways that Adobe addresses mobile, from Adobe Experience Manager, which is a content management system, Adobe Phonegap, which is a mobile framework development system, and then Adobe Digital Publishing Suite, which again is another mobile development system, but it has a slightly different flavor than how they could build mobile apps with content with sites. So really, as we're looking at this, and as the poll indicated, your options are really narrowed down to really 3 fundamental choices. You can work with a responsive design website. As you can see, we're talking about browser-based, different sizes. You can have a mobile website, which again is mobile-based, but you're really working within browsers. And then you have what we are calling native apps, which is a combination of pure native development and hybrid. And I'm going to go through each one of these and how this relates to not only your branding strategy, but also how you can approach from that user engagement perspective in content management. So let's start with responsive design. As the poll indicated, this is the most popular choice at the moment of how people are integrating mobile into their web presence. So for those of you who are maybe not as familiar, that might be the case, but really responsive design has been talked about a lot over the last year and a half, 2 years. But really, responsive design is a one-size-fits-all, as we say here. It is a single site. It responds to different screen resolutions depending on what device you're using. So as this example with Jazeera America, it's a brand new website that launched last year. It has never existed. It was part of Al Jazeera purchasing Current TV from Al Gore. And so as they were launching the TV channel, we worked with them to launch their mobile website, or excuse me, their website in general, which included a responsive design. So what you see from this perspective is one site that works with all different screen resolutions. And it's the same code base. It is the same way that a content author will write and edit content. It's just going to be viewable in different, it just rearranges itself to be viewed differently on different devices. So what we call those different devices are those different view resolutions, we call them breakpoints. And so one of the interesting things about responsive design is really you have to consider how many different devices do you want to support. As we see on the screen here, we're really talking about a landscape in desktop, a landscape in tablet, and a portrait in mobile phone. And that would be considered 3 breakpoints. You can support portrait in a tablet and landscape in a phone, and you may still only have 3 breakpoints, or you may have 5 breakpoints. But each one of those breakpoints requires you to actually think about content in a very specific way. So breakpoints is one of those fundamental things that is a challenge for responsive design, because it makes a content author have to think about their content in what I would call multi-dimensional way. For the number of years that we've existed today on the web, content has really been about whatever I see on my authoring screen is what I'm going to see on the website. Now we have to start thinking about this in really a multi-dimensional way. And content authors, as you are creating content, it isn't just about now what are you looking at on a desktop site. You have to look at this from a number of different devices. And tools like Adobe Experience Manager and a number of other content management systems will give you the ability to preview that content in multiple devices, multiple types of screens, but really it is a one-size-fits-all. This happens by using a combination from a templating perspective of JavaScript, HTML, and CSS, but it really is also the broadest reach that's going to be available, because all you have to worry about is just having a browser. And in some cases, you can actually view a website that is responsive design on a feature phone. It doesn't even have to be a smartphone. The downside is that because you're using a browser, you don't have access to a lot of the other phone features that are available. You probably can get away with actually having some GPS-enabled location service options available, but really that's about the limit you're going to get. So you're going to lose out on some of the feature functionality you get inside developing straight into a native application, but you're going to get the broadest reach for your broadest consumer base possible by going with responsive design. Again, I think the biggest trigger point from this is really thinking about your content in multiple perspectives because it will look different. Those of you who have maybe a lot of tables on your website are not going to find responsive design very well for you because tables do not go very well. They don't respond very well to smaller screens. And so thinking about your content in different screen resolutions is very important when you're looking at responsive design. But managing that content is a single source. I edit my content, I add my content, I get my assets all in the same way, no matter which environment I'm looking at. So some things to consider when you're looking at responsive design. From a marketing and I'll say content side, it's consistent user experience across all the screens. Again, you're looking at the broadest reach possible because there's no special features, there's no special tools that are needed outside of just having a web browser, which every smartphone comes with, whether it's Safari or Chrome or Firefox or Opera, it all works the same way. From a tech side, you have a single code base. Your same development team that can create your website can create it for responsive design and can create it for mobile devices. So there's no need from both sides of that house, from a tech side and from a content side, which I think is why a lot of people start there because it's not, the skill set is not necessarily different for what you need to accomplish. However, we have the opportunity now with actually looking at things such as mobile web, or what we also call an M.dot site. So these are a slightly different flavor of what we're having from a mobile experience. There is actually a different set of templates that are offered in a mobile setting, whether it be a tablet or a mobile phone, as they're offered desktop. So really we're looking at we're considering two different jobs of what your site's trying to accomplish. So with a mobile site, in the traditional sense with templates, let's take this example for Four Seasons. So Four Seasons is obviously in the hospitality business and they have properties all across the world. And one of their main focuses for their desktop site is to engage customers to know what properties they want to visit, explore their properties. Therefore, as you can see, very image heavy. It's very rich in multimedia. It's showing people on what they can do besides just staying at their property. It's engaging them in a multitude of ways, because that's what those consumers want to do on a desktop site. And then they can also do things such as make a reservation and actually check out other things. But really, the whole purpose, their top job for what the desktop site is going to be is about engaging inside the properties. However, on their mobile site, it is a different top job. They've done through their research, they've identified that really the job that this mobile site is supposed to accomplish is a subset of features of what the desktop site is. It is really focused on finding a property strictly to be able to reserve and make a reservation and check on my reservation. Can they explore other features of those properties? Yes, but as you can see, it's not as image heavy. The purpose of it is more specific and it is more narrow. So therefore, all the content that sits on the mobile site is actually not the same content that sits on the desktop site. It's a subset of that. And so therefore, the mobile site really can't stand by itself. However, there is actually some sharing features of what the mobile and the desktop site actually have, and that is the content can be shared amongst both of them. There are two different sets of templates. You'd actually author them in some ways in two different places, because you can actually have different content on the mobile site that you would on the desktop, and you could also share content from the desktop to the mobile site as well. So you have both opportunities available to you to give your consumers that mobile moment that they need, depending on what their purpose is for what your consumers want to do with you on. So again, Four Seasons wants to have deeper engagement, lots of visuals on the desktop site, but they want to have a more strictly business mobile moment when they're looking at stuff on their mobile website. And I think that's a distinct difference of a mobile site than a responsive design site. Again, just some quick things to consider when you're looking at the marketing side, content side of the house. Again, it's a subset of the desktop functionality. But again, you don't need to download anything. So there is no app to download. There's no new features you need to download. But it is something that, so when you actually author and edit content, you can author and edit it and publish it in real time. Still has a broader reach than your native app scenario, but it's not going to be as broad as, per se, a responsive, well, it probably would be as broad as a responsive design site. The difference is just the purpose of what you're trying to accomplish with your mobile site versus a responsive design site. For those of you who are already in the we went desktop first category and you're looking to adopt to a mobile site, I would say that there's actually less cost in reworking a desktop site into a mobile site because you're really just adding new templates and deciding what content fits in those templates. What you're going to find in responsive design is when you retrofit your templates and your site into a responsive design, there's a lot more reconfiguration that needs to happen. You're regression testing a lot more for your content across the whole site versus maybe just a subset of your content or a subset of your functionality. So if you're already on desktop and you're looking to go mobile, you might want to consider a mobile website versus a responsive design site. And then again, your skill sets and your development teams are going to be basically the same because they create templates for your desktop site. They're going to be the same skill sets that you need to create templates for your mobile site. And then you can also just make changes just to your mobile site and just your desktop site independently. So that's actually an advantage that that offers as well. Looking at native apps. So when you're looking at the spectrum of apps again, or the way you can address mobile, there's a couple different flavors and where the apps come into play. Starting with a native app, I think is one of those that is going to offer those of you who are looking for a lot of custom functionality, a lot of rich, deep user engagement, is where you're going to find native apps to be the best bang for your buck. It is going to give you the best opportunity to take advantage of all the features that the phones offer today. So access to your camera, access to audio, access to be able to use a microphone. Those are all things that are going to be available in a phone that you're not going to be able to get from a responsive design or even a mobile MDOT site. You'll be able to actually monetize your app because you're going to be able to put it in the App Store, which is something that you can't necessarily do because you only need a browser to visit of an MDOT site or a responsive design site. And then another thing is that you have access to things such as push notifications. So you can bring customers and consumers back into your app by producing push notifications that you're not going to get so much on a desktop or a mobile or responsive design site. So those are some features that are actually, make it an advantage. And if, those are things that you may find engage your customer experience. And depending if you're a commerce site or if you're a different type of organization that wants to engage consumers in more rich, image-rich or engagement-rich features, the native apps are going to be one of the opportunities you're going to want to take into consideration. But there is actually a big trade-off. And the big trade-off is this, and we've all kind of experienced this, I'm sure, if you have your own, everyone's using different devices these days, which is which platform do you develop against and what sequence do you develop them in. So we know that Apple has the biggest app store that's out there. They have by far the most apps that are available. They continue to grow leaps and bounds every day, followed closely by Android as well. But those are, we'll find often that a new app will come out and it'll get created for iPhone first and Android second. Sometimes it's the reverse, but really they're looking at, how they want those consumers and which code bases they're going to engage with first. Usually, traditionally, you'll find Windows Phone and BlackBerry still hanging on by a thread, still created after the fact. And that's because you actually have 4 different code bases you have to develop against. Things do not translate holistically over all of the platforms, so your skill sets are different. The content that's created and how you manage all the content inside those apps is going to be done differently. And therefore, you have an issue with just the fact that it's going to take more time and energy to develop and maintain. So there is actually a big trade-off, and I think one of them is not only skill sets, but it really is going to be cost as well, from a money perspective of developing them, but actually having the right resources. And the fact that you're really beholden to each of the individual app stores for how quickly you can publish an update, if the updates need to have additional review or if they get rejected. So you're really stuck in a position where no matter what you do, you are still beholden to those app stores to get that distribution out the door. But then there's this new flavor that comes in with native apps, which is what we're calling a hybrid. And there's 2 different actually ways we can approach hybrid apps, and they follow some very similar ways that they approach things. So Adobe Phonegap is one of those hybrid ways where it actually creates what we call a web viewer wrapper that's inside a native app kind of experience. So what you end up doing is submitted to the App Store, which is what you're actually seeing here on the left-hand side with the FirstEnergy app. It is, but the functionality and the content is actually coming from Adobe Experience Manager, and your content authors are managing content in the same way they would be managing the desktop site. So you're actually getting a little bit of the best of both worlds in the sense that you have something that's submitted to the App Store, but this content is actually coming from your actual website, and it can still have some offline content creation or content abilities, so you can actually look at content offline if you're not connected to the internet. However, it is leveraging the web in many ways to actually consume that content and view it. You actually get still access to some of the native features of the phone, like GPS, or actually access to the camera. So there's some benefits that you get a little bit of best of both worlds in a hybrid scenario using Phonegap, but it's still not going to give you the holistic user experience you probably have if you went with a native app versus going with maybe even something just as rudimentary as a responsive design site where you don't have any of the features or user experience available. The thing about Phonegap that's interesting is, again, you're using a combination of JavaScript, HTML, and CSS to basically create once, distribute among all the platforms. So while the wrapper might be slightly different, the way the framework is set up is that it allows you to really deliver that experience from a development standpoint a lot faster and a lot smoother. So you can create the wrapper, and then your user experience is, again, really mostly about whatever you can create in HTML, like you would for any other mobile site or any HTML experience, you can deliver via Phonegap experience. So looking at this and the things to consider, web editors can update the app and app content, really as they need and publish it as instantly as they need to. You can access, some and not most of the native device features these days because of the actual interface for the development platform is getting better and better. The trade-off is that you're not going to get some of the UX experiences that you could have, the way you slide and move between screens and whatnot. It's not going to be the same in a Phonegap experience as you would with a native development. But the cost could be significantly less than doing pure native development because you're not actually developing against multiple platforms. It could be a write once, publish in many different places. From the tech side, you're really looking at the same code base, and you can use the same web development team. You don't necessarily have to have a different development team to create your mobile app using Phonegap that you would if you were to go native pure play. So again, just to kind of reiterate the fact, using tools such as Adobe Experience Manager here, you can actually leverage the same drag and drop functionality, the same assets from your digital asset manager, the same content from the website, and get that pushed out to Phonegap experience just by using the actual interface instead of having to go develop someplace else, which is great for content authors who want to be able to push content on a more regular basis and not have to worry about going through some other submission process. But then you can get fancy, and this is where we have a little bit of an exception to the rule. So bringing back Jazeera America into the mix and how we work with them. So the first image I showed you actually had a desktop, a tablet, and a mobile phone. Well, they also created a mobile app, and this is really for their more dedicated and loyal consumers of their content, those who are looking for a different experience, a more rich experience, and that's what Jazeera wanted to provide. So they actually have two different things that are going on. They have a responsive design site that has all the content that the desktop site is going to have, but they have a subset of content that is available into their mobile app. And what's even more interesting is that we're actually allowing Jazeera to manage that content through some custom interfaces we've built for their editors to be able to say, hey, I want this subset of content, these 10 articles out of the maybe 100 that are written today, to go to the mobile app. And on top of it, so we've leveraged a content API to allow them to actually drive their content into the mobile app, and so their content authors can still manage all that content inside AVM. In addition to that, they also are using some other APIs to leverage some audio features that give. They're using some audio features that are allowing them to actually have a richer user experience. So articles that are created inside the website are sent to a third-party narration service that's actually delivering that as a rich experience into the app as well. So what's really great about this is that we're taking AVM and we're extending it even further, but really this media company is being able to take their content and leverage it in the most maximum way possible for their consumers, which is actually, I think, giving them the best user experience possible, and I think they're really seeing that dividend from that. Finally, I will say that the last kind of opportunity, and this is a newer one that's come into play recently from Adobe, is their digital publishing suite. So for those of you who aren't familiar, DPS is actually born out of the InDesign and the Creative Cloud side of the house. So it was something that was really kind of originally built for those who have print magazines that were actually using InDesign, InCopy, and other Adobe tools to create that content and basically publish it out to the magazine that you get in your mailbox on any month or any given week. They started to offer that in digital experiences, which actually enhanced and gave the actual InDesign designers the ability to create mobile apps. And using very similar technology that they use for Phonegap, they create this content wrapper that then allows them to push out content independently of actually having the app in place in the store. So now you have this opportunity to give your designers the ability to create apps without being a developer, to give them more rich experiences because you can actually create a different user experience. It doesn't have to be just this flip magazine where everything that I see in my print magazine is laid out exactly the same way that it is in the digital version. To actually have a user experience that they can create much more robust and much more native to the user experiences you get with custom coding and the native UI, native creation of a mobile app. But now the Adobe's taken this even further, and this is where it gets really interesting because they've blended this also into Adobe Experience Manager. So assets can now reside in both InDesign and from your website, taking content from both places, blending it into a single user experience inside a mobile device, and now you're giving your authors, your content consumers, a more content, more rich user experience than you would actually have if you went through something independently. So that's one of the great things about DPS, because it's giving those who have content-rich sites, those who are media publishers, those who maybe have the ability to enable your sales force, and that's another great use case. You can take content that's from your website, you can take content you're creating in PDFs or brochures, you can blend that together into a mobile app, and you can give that to your consumers in a way that is not only going to take advantage of the mobile features, but give your authors the content creation experience that is going to be really well placed together and have an engaging user experience. So DPS is bringing that whole new world to the table that is giving you as content creators an ability to create user experience that you've never really had before, but still giving your authors the control over what they want to do. So as we look at DPS and we consider that web editors and designers can really update the app just as they're doing any of their other content updating, whether they're working in InDesign or whether they're working inside AEM, your content management system, both that information can get blended together and deployed in one specific native experience. You get to take advantage of the native features such as the rich scrolling features, access to some of the phone features as well. You can create things and then have them emailed out all throughout the mobile device. And again, as I mentioned, really publications that hopped on board with this, such as Condé Nast and other major media publications, as well as those who are looking at things such as B2B manufacturing or other organizations that are really trying to enable their sales force and move forward with all of that and to enable their sales team to have this instead of using paper and delivering that. You can actually work off the tablets and work in mobile remote locations and engage your customers in a much more personal way. And again, from a tech side, the coding of the templates in both of those can be the same. So if I'm going to create a mobile device inside InDesign, those features are built right into InDesign. From an AEM or content management perspective, that coding of a template is the same way you're going to code a template for the DPS scenario as well. So, same development teams, no new skill sets are needed to bring in place. You just have to understand how you're going to actually deliver that and engage that full mobile experience at the end of the day. So, really, as we look at this, one size does not fit all. Really, you can deliver multiple different experiences depending on your job. So I've seen a lot of websites have a desktop site, a mobile site, whether it be responsive design or an MDOT site, and have a mobile app as well. Again, because of the different loyalties they have and the different types of engagement they want to have across their consumer bases. So really, it's a one size does not fit all. You may need to combine these approaches to meet what your audience expectations are. As we look down through this list again, responsive design really you can accomplish through really a content management system and just using HTML and CSS and JavaScript. If you want a mobile web, again, it's a content management system and specific templates. But when you get into the app creation, you can choose to go straight with a native development, or you can go with a hybrid approach, which is delivering a lot of opportunities for you to let your content authors create things in the way they need to create them, and then still deliver things in a more robust and immediate fashion. So now I'd like to talk and bring in Scott Infante, who is the Manager of Enterprise Technology and is responsible for the development and implementation of web mobile strategies for FirstEnergy Corp. Scott, you there?
Yeah, Fred, thanks. How you doing?
Good. So thanks for joining us today. So, as you've worked at FirstEnergy for a number of years now, FirstEnergy has evolved over the last few years. Can you tell us or share with us some of the reasons on what drove you, or what mobile moments drove you guys to start to elaborate on your digital strategy that you have today?
Sure. So I guess the two biggest moments are ones that most people on the call should be familiar with. So we had Hurricane Irene in 2011 and Hurricane Sandy in 2012 that caused a great deal of impact to our service territory along the East Coast and also into the eastern portion of Pennsylvania. So at the time, prior to those two events happening, mobility was something of a strategic or roadmap item. We didn't quite get to the point that we had fully implemented or fully enabled that functionality. And then these two, very major storms come, and the immediate outpouring of, I guess, customer need around communication from us to them, and also vice versa. In these cases, primarily around outages. So not just reporting outages, obviously, when they're impacted, but also communicating back to them through multiple channels as to when their service could be restored, or what was a delay causing their service to not be restored as quick as they thought it might happen. So those were the two primary moments that really created an opportunity for us to increase customer communication. And then also, I would say on the business side, we also had an opportunity around cost avoidance. So on the communication side, I mean, obviously those two storms were a big impact to us. So we moved down the route of implementing a mobile website, and then followed that with a mobile app, in addition to our full desktop website, obviously, and then later on introduced a fourth channel, that being SMS text messaging. And the main theme across all of those channels was that we needed to ensure that the messaging back to our customers was going to be consistent. So that's why having a content repository such as AEM was so much of an important factor in being successful in those areas. On the business side, like I mentioned, cost avoidance, we saw that somewhat of an organic means of driving more customers to these additional channels once they were available, versus directing them to a call center or handling interaction with them via traditional United States Postal Service mail, for forms, filling those out, sending them back, et cetera. So there was a benefit to us as a company there to avoid some of the costs associated with those other channels. But also, there was a big benefit for our customers as well, and that, it extended a much greater amount of efficiency to them to process these transactions. Turnaround time was also very high. And then, the ability to, perform those transactions, at your convenience, rather than working around the schedule of when the call centers were open or when you were available to make the call, et cetera. So, and that extended beyond just, paying a bill and reporting an outage, like I mentioned earlier. That also, extended into other forms of customer transactions that we're able to see as being popular calls coming to the call center, and then planning for those to be extended out to the other channels as well, mobile web, mobile app, and then also some even being enabled through the SMS platform.
Great. So, FirstEnergy is a utility that owns multiple brands, and as you look at managing your content amongst all those brands and keeping your brand in place, and can you talk a little bit about how AEM is helping you deliver that brand consistency as necessary, with also managing the content that you need to manage?
Absolutely, and Fred, you touched on it in your portion of the presentation a couple minutes ago, and that was really just starting with this single content base managed within AEM, and then having the ability to carve up that larger content that's made available through our full-featured website, and identifying the areas of content or subsets of the content that would be extended out to the other channels, in this case primarily being the mobile version of the website, and then also the mobile apps. So it was a huge, benefit to our content maintainers in the business to, only manage a single source of the content, and then decide which portions of that content are better suited or best suited to be extended out to those other channels. So as far as the operating companies go, yes, I mean, there's 10 of them, and from an app standpoint, each operating company, each brand has their own app in both the Apple and Google Play app stores. So now we're looking at a total of 20 mobile apps available for those 10 operating companies, in addition to an app that's available for our parent company. So 22 apps total, 11 in each app store. So we leveraged AEM with very tight integration to those apps to allow for the personalization of the experience, obviously of the customer. Where is that customer located geographically, presenting them with the content that's most relevant to them, as well as any branding, logos and digital assets that we also manage within AEM that is also pertinent to them based upon the operating company or the brand that they are a customer of. So also I think one of the opportunities here, going back to the idea of communication and consistency of communication, was AEM allows us to tailor the message out to the customer based upon their impact. So, we are a large utility. Our operating companies are spread out across multiple states. There are times when storms and other outage events only impact a portion of our customer base. So, AEM coupled with these, 3 channels, 4 channels, however you want to look at it, allows us to deliver the content that's, most relevant to the customer. So if you are a customer that is impacted by a large storm or outage event, we can tailor specific content to you to help you out, but also at the same time for the portion of our customer base that is not impacted by that storm, we're not changing or altering their experience in these various channels if we don't need to.
Great. So we did a poll earlier in the session here today, and it looked like that responsive design, followed closely by MDOT sites or mobile sites, are where a lot of our audience that are on the webinar today are going with their mobile strategy. So can you actually describe a little bit, or why did FirstEnergy go with Phonegap versus a native app? And we'll get to your mobile site, in a second here. But you guys went Phonegap versus native app. Can you explain some of those business decisions and why you went down that road?
Sure. So as a manager, one of the main benefits of Phonegap was I did not have to retrain existing skill sets or identify additional skill sets and sort of augment what they already knew with platform-specific development of programming languages, such as Xcode for iOS and some of the other things that are very specific to Android. And Josh, you mentioned Windows Phone and BlackBerry, and each one of them, potentially has their own specific code base that you'd have to manage, right? As you alluded to in one of your graphics. So Phonegap allowed us to leverage an existing pool of very experienced resources that were very good at web development, and then just extend that web development experience into mobile application development. So, helps in 2 ways. Obviously, one, speed to market, right? If we already know or know most of what's going to be needed, we can turn the applications around very quickly. And I think also, again, maybe being a little more partial on the manager side, it certainly helps, or I believe it certainly helped with talent retention and talent acquisition, from the standpoint that we can market our success in these areas when it comes to recruiting new hires or integrating it into our intern program and so forth. In addition to that, obviously Phonegap allows us to reuse a pretty good amount of code that was developed for our full-featured website and reuse those components primarily in the service area or service side of the application, and then extend that code to handle both the mobile apps as well as the mobile website, and then, like I said, also what was already available or previously available on the full-featured website. And then obviously the APIs, you mentioned this as well, but just to kind of throw this in there as well, calling the camera from the device, retrieving a GPS location if it was needed to report an outage. These are all things that Phonegap gives us the ability to do. May not be doing all of those right now, but obviously a very scalable platform, and it also is being further integrated into AEM itself. So really saw a lot of benefit there, and it's really just leveraging the investment that we had in AEM at the time.
Great. So you are an example of those that have a multi-pronged approach. So you have a desktop site, you have a mobile site, and you have a mobile app. So can you talk about is there actually a different strategy on you're using with the mobile site versus the mobile app, or are they really they complement each other just based on who wants to use what and it's a user preference?
So ever since the beginning, we knew that our release strategy with these multiple channels was going to be full-featured web or desktop web first, mobile web second, and then mobile app third. The reason for that cadence is it allows us some flexibility in the web areas to verify new functionality, potentially gather feedback from customers, definitely gather feedback from our business stakeholders, and then course correct ourselves or make any adjustments that we need to in the web and mobile web spaces that, as everyone knows, is a lot more flexible to get changes into those environments. Before we would commit to something that's a little bit more set like the mobile app, and I'm speaking specifically here around the mobile app submission process and the review process that happens with Apple and the not so review process that happens with Android. But either way, we think it's very difficult to go back to a customer and sort of correct an issue when they are when they've already downloaded the app or downloaded the update that introduced maybe a defect or a bug. So having that cadence of mobile web first before the mobile app gives us some additional time to really kick the tires on new functionality, dog food it a bit, to use the term that Google is so famous for, before we build that into our mobile app. So that all really translates into quarterly releases is what we target for new functionality being pushed out to our web and mobile web channels. And then we're starting to track probably around 2 times a year for that functionality or a subset of that functionality to be added or included in the mobile apps that are available in the app stores.
Great. Well, thanks a lot, Scott. I think those are some great examples of how you guys are taking advantage of a multi-pronged approach using both desktop, mobile, and as well as the app as well to address your customers' needs and the mobile moments you're trying to accomplish. So, Tom, I think we're ready for some other questions that might have been from the audience during the webinar.
Thank you very much, and thank you both. Both of you have been wonderful with your information. I think the first question I want to ask is, you've talked a lot about the Adobe products, but how much of this is possible with other content management systems and maybe open source solutions?
So I think there are definitely a variety of other tools and content management systems that are available. I think of the 3 main routes that we talked about today, a responsive design and a mobile website, it can be delivered pretty much with any mainstream content management system that's on the market today, whether it's Sitecore, Actron, or SDL. Those are the technologies that are used to actually implement those, are agnostic really of any content management system that exists today. I think we picked on Adobe because it's something that we are very familiar with, that we implemented for the last 10 years plus. So that was really the focus for this particular conversation. But those are, because it's HTML, CSS, and Java based from a responsive, JavaScript based from a responsive design standpoint, it doesn't matter. It could be static, flat. I don't use a content management system at all. You can use that to create a responsive design site. A mobile website is just making sure that you have templates that are targeted to a mobile device, and that could even be done with some other configurations. So those are really CMS agnostic. When you get into the mobile app development, especially if you're talking about the native development, those are, again, it's content management system agnostic. You're coding Apple in Xcode, you're coding Android in its, all the other systems are coded in its own flavor of whatever coding that is required. The difference that we've talked about today that are really more Adobe specific come into Phonegap, which there is some open source alternatives that go with that, because Phonegap was originally an open source platform. DPS is Adobe specific. It is something that's very specific to InDesign and Adobe Experience Manager and how they blended that together. So while I tried to kind of make that a little bit clear up front, but really you can use multiple systems that are available to offer a lot of this, except for really the DPS, the Digital Publishing Suite scenario, is very much Adobe specific.
Very good. Thank you for that explanation. Really appreciate that. We've got a lot of good questions here. We have about 11 minutes left. Let's see how many of them we can get through. Suvajit Purkayaska, I hope I'm saying that correctly, asked a couple of questions here. One of them is, how can you approach mobile analytics? I think that's an interesting question. We talked a lot about the B2C part, but let's talk about that part of it a little bit. Mobile analytics, gentlemen?
So I could jump into that one, Fred. Obviously, one of the things that we use to determine what new functionality is going to be built into our channels is based upon what we see users doing and behaving, on the channels that are, out there already. So Google Analytics actually recently has made available a very good analytics service that can be integrated into a mobile app. That's platform agnostic, and it works especially well with some of these hybrid apps that are more JavaScript based. So it's a free service. I'm sure there's other ones out there, but that's the one we've been looking at, and it's nice because it's a similar presentation to Google Analytics if you're using that for your web analytics to understand what your users are doing, potentially on your full feature website or on your mobile website.
That's a good answer. Let me ask this question. What are the basic considerations for designing multi-tenanted responsive to mobile sites? Can you answer that? Multi-tenanted responsive mobile CMS.
I might be able to jump in.
Yeah,
I think, and if I'm understanding the question correctly, I think first things first is you need to understand what goal each of your environments are planning to accomplish. If you don't have a specific mobile strategy, probably going with something like responsive design might be your best approach, because it at least gives your audience the ability to engage with you in a site that is optimized for the device they're viewing it on. If you have a specific mobile strategy, such as, again, we'll just take the hospitality, hotel industry for a second. Like your desktop site will serve a more possibility for a more engaging experience than maybe what you want. The mobile, I'm checking my reservation, I want to make a reservation. And airlines are the same way. Really, your desktop site is going to be more feature-rich as far as what you're trying to accomplish as far as making reservations, whereas your mobile experience is maybe more checking about just what's the status of my flight, or is the person I'm picking up, is their flight on time? So those are two different use cases. Therefore, you're going to want to take possibly two different approaches on how you accomplish that. Those, I think, is really how you need to break it down, is the audience, the engagement level you want to have, what is the main purpose for them visiting you on the device that they're visiting you on, and what you want them to do with that in that use case. That's, I think, your first step, and that kind of really, I think, goes along with what Scott did with FirstEnergy and how they identified their approach of stuff as well. Scott, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I mean, I think you pretty much covered our area. We're not, as you guys have seen, we're not quite at the full responsive design area yet. Probably revisit that as we go through some upgrades to our AEM instances, this year and possibly in the next.
Okay, we have next question here. It comes from Diane Hufstedler to both of you, and she asks, do we need a mobile version of our website if we're already responsive?
I would say, go ahead, Scott. Why don't you start with this one?
I would say if you already have a responsive version of your full site, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily be able to justify the addition of what would be a third, or second mobile web channel. But Fred, I mean, I don't know if you agree or disagree.
I think it goes back to that first part of that last question, which is, what is the purpose of is there a different purpose or a different task or a different job you want your consumers to, or your visitors to do in a mobile setting that would be different than the desktop, and can that be accomplished with the responsive design? Responsive design has some opportunities to do some stuff that you can actually target different screens to show and hide different content, so you might be able to accomplish that. If you can't, then you might need to identify what the tasks are and then build something specific that'll be more optimized for that mobile experience than if you were to have just a one-size-fits-all approach.
Good. Here's another one from Subhajit. Web-to-print products exist in the market for CMS and digital asset management. Is there any concept like mobile-to-print?
I think that there are definitely opportunities out there. I mean, specifically speaking in the Adobe stack, I would say I am not familiar with them, but I am also probably not as familiar with the mobile-to-print opportunities that might exist in other platforms as well. So they could exist. I'm not familiar with any concepts specifically that I might be able to give an answer to, but can certainly follow up if necessary.
Okay, sounds good. Let's see. Scott, I'd be interested to hear any future plans you have around mobile for FirstEnergy. What's next on your agenda?
So we're always sort of evaluating, you know, what the next group of functionality is that we want to build out into the mobile apps. I mean, obviously, I think we want to get better at integrating some of the communications, push notifications directly into the apps themselves. So right now, you know, we have this SMS channel, which is sort of independent from the apps. You know, I think we're seeing a lot of people probably, you know, downloading the app, but also using SMS, you know, for certain cases. You know, really our mantra is, you know, what functionality can we roll out that's going to positively impact the largest amount of, you know, nearly 6 million customers or thereabouts. And obviously there's business goals and KPIs, and there's a lot of factors, and obviously regulatory requirements too. I didn't mention that. They also come into play. So sometimes our functionality that we roll out to mobile users is, you know, somewhat told to us by the utility commissions in the states that we operate in. So we kind of have to balance a lot of people asking and demanding, and then, you know, really at the end of the day, just determine which of those is a good mobile use case, because there's a lot of bad mobile use cases out there that I think people try to sneak in, and I've seen some of that, you know, with various companies. So, you know, being consistent in that sort of, you know, stages and gates, checks and balances area as well is important for us.
Okay, I think we're going to be wrapping up now. And I just wanted to thank our guest today. I'm going to switch back to our next slide here. This webinar has been recorded. I want to thank everybody for being here. Scott Infante and Fred Faulkner, you guys are just fountains of information, and we really appreciate it. We'll make the recording of this website available on CMSwire in the next few days. Thanks again to Fred Faulkner and Scott Infante for all their ideas at ICFI and FirstEnergy Corporation, and for sponsoring today's event. Stay tuned for upcoming webinars on CMSwire. We have them regularly, and we'd love to have you back for another presentation. Signing off from San Francisco, this is Tom Murphy.